Hello and welcome to On the Corner, the official podcast, pitcherlist.com. I'm your host, Eric Samulski, joined on this sunny January afternoon by the freshly coiffed Nick Pollack. Nick, last time you said you got to cut your hair. You were going to definitely cut your hair. You're looking good, man. Looking suave.
Thanks, buddy. Hey, what is happening? I had to do it because we have PitchCon this week.
Yes.
And I spent a long time this weekend crafting this very detailed schedule for 44 hours starting on Thursday and going through Sunday. That is January 30th through February 2nd. It is 100% free. So just go to pitchos.com/pitchcon. Enjoy all these panels and presentations. We're doing it to raise money to combat ALS. $10,000 is the goal. We've done it for 5 straight years. Hopefully we can do it again for the 6th. And if you're listening to this podcast after PitchCon has happened, guess what? You can watch the whole thing on YouTube. We'll have it all on YouTube in a giant playlist a week after the presentation is over. So
I'm
go
so
check
glad
that out
when,
this week. And
I'm so glad when you started doing that. Because obviously, it's like I want to go to all of these things, but it's hard. And so it's nice to be able to like look them up on YouTube and watch them, listen to them at your own leisure. And obviously, it's early enough in the off season. There's a lot of time to kind of hit all of these, from now until we start things off. So that's a really cool feature. I'm excited to see the schedule when you make that all public.
Oh yeah, it'll be. I mean, I'm making it public tonight. So excited for that. So many fun things, little surprises in there too.
Nice.
But really, it's just a great event, guys. We also have prizes. We have prizes you can win subscriptions and merch and autographed memorabilia. We also give away a free PL Pro lifetime subscription to one PitchCon watcher every single year. I mean, guys, it's the best time. It starts on January 30th, this Thursday, 11 a.m. Eastern time. Go to pitcherlist.com/pitchcon. You can also just watch the live stream straight on Playback. So playback.tv/pitcherlist. Go follow it there. That's where everything's going to be truly hosted. So go check that out. You can chat with the community. It's the best time. I can't wait. But right now, we've got other things to discuss, don't we, Eric?
Yes, we do. It's going to be the best time over here as well. Nick and I have started kind of, continuing this little mini series where we're like taking some stock in early ADP, just some values that we're starting to look at. And so today we're looking at pitchers who Nick and I believe could see a value jump in the coming weeks if their status in their MLB rotations changes. So these are all guys who are either on the fringe of their current rotations or guys who are currently projected out of the rotation on sites like Roster Resource, which Nick and I are none of this is a criticism of those sites. Those people do awesome work trying to kind of guess who's going to be in a rotation and not. So it might just be pitchers who Nick and I feel like are probably going to be in the rotation, even though they're not publicly listed in rotations right now. And when those changes get made, we could see an ADP jump, or guys who are maybe on a battle for a rotation and their status might not change until the middle of spring training. But if those statuses do change, these are guys who Nick and I feel like could, get a big bump in ADP. So kind of, all guys to keep in the back of your head, guys maybe in draft and hold leagues who could be good targets for you because we believe there's value if they get jobs, and just, pitchers to watch in spring training. So I have labeled this list that we're going to put together, these groupings of players. I've labeled it the Ryan Nelson honorary Fringe starting pitcher list, because Nick and I both feel like Ryan Nelson is one of the certainly best 5 pitchers in the Diamondbacks, on the Diamondbacks roster.
Absolutely.
Definitely the best 6. And even if the Diamondbacks go to a 6-man rotation, we feel like Ryan Nelson will eventually be in that rotation. He is currently not slated to be in the rotation. And in this great little sheet that we have put together that Nick is going to share with people afterwards, we've looked at the NFBC drafts for the last 2 weeks. That's 32 total drafts for the last 2 weeks. Ryan Nelson's ADP in those drafts is pick 491. He is the 103rd starting pitcher off the board. Nick, you and I feel, we've said it before, there's not a lot of analysis to do here, but you and I feel like this could be a huge value for Ryan Nelson in the weeks to come.
Absolutely. I mean, it is weird that they have 6. Corbin Burns, Zach Gallen, Merrill Kelly, Eduardo Rodriguez, Brandon Fott, and Jordan Montgomery. Now, they've been obviously trying to get rid of Jordan Montgomery. It's kind of interesting how that works right now. And maybe they'll find a suitor before the season starts. It takes really 1 or 2 injuries, really just 1 injury on the teams. If you're like, oh no, we need somebody, Jordan Montgomery will work better than whatever option they have. There you go. That's all settled. But yeah, you got to think that Ryan Nelson is going to at least compete for a job in some way. We have seen, obviously, Eduardo Rodriguez and Merrill Kelly have the injury bug as well in some fashion. But as of now, he's out of the rotation. We will see how things progress in the spring, of course. But it's really one of those scenarios where if he gets the 5th job, and that's a huge thing that we're talking about this episode, is just if they get the 5th job, are they going to be jumping up massively where in my 12 teamers, I'm now circling this guy as, no, I need to go and get him. Because if he isn't on a squad, then it's just, well, not worth your time. Yeah. And with Ryan Nelson, what makes him so interesting is he has this 533 PLV 4-seamer. That is 92nd PLV, and it's rooted in elite vert that is 17 to 18 inches of vert with 9.8 extension, 74th percentile. It's not steep. It's not really flat. It's not steep either. It's just fine with it. So when you have great extension and elite vert at 95 with an intent to locate upstairs, it all just kind of works. Wait a second, this is a good fastball. It's not really, I wouldn't even say it's like the most dominant one. It had a lot of success and a lot of very good results, especially in the second half last year for Ryan Nelson. I do wonder if there is another gear as well. I saw it at times last year in the spring for Ryan Nelson throwing this cutter that looked like a proper tight, hard cutter that just, it wasn't like an 86, which I think would do it be worse for this pitch that they're trying to, that's like jumping on them inside the zone. It just has tight movement. It looks like the fastball so much that it doesn't at 89. I really hope to see that return. I think that can just help him take that extra step, because we all kind of feel like that run that Ryan Nelson had at the end of the year isn't real, but I think that there's a lot of value to be had here. It's generally been a good defense behind him too in Arizona. And if he does get that position, I would be getting him in my 12 teamers by the end of it, because ADP is going to have it way down the marks. And that's really the cool thing here, is that there's all this potential value in all these guys. And Ryan Nelson could be someone that in your 12 teamer guys aren't aware of who he is and sees the ADP mark and says, well, I don't want him. But it's only because he doesn't have a spot right now. So
yes,
hope it's Ryan Nelson.
And we saw him battle for a spot at the beginning of last year. And it was not consistent production out of him, because he was I guess he was in and out of the rotation, or he was on the fringes of the rotation then as well. But Ryan Nelson finished last year the 93rd ranked starting pitcher. And that was with kind of like all the inconsistencies and with not being in the rotation and with all that other kind of stuff. I feel like it seems like a top 60 starter is like a baseline for him if he was a full year as a starter. And that's not even baking in potential improvement from somebody who is young and has the ability to improve.
It is wild. It was a 3.13 ERA with a 0.97 whip and a 26% strikeout rate with just 5% walks in 13 starts to end the year when he really got back into the rotation at the start of July. That's remarkable, to say the least. Like 78 innings of this. He won leagues for many people because of it, right? Mm-hmm. And it wasn't this absurd left on base rate, 76%. It wasn't an absurd home run fly ball rate or BAB at the hotels there. 263 BAB had been a 13% home run fly ball rate, right? He has this good defense behind him, 36% ICR. Just that 4-seamer was cooking. I mean, it was just there, and guys couldn't do much with it. So, yeah, keep your eye on Ryan Nelson.
Keep your eye on him. Keep your eye on somebody going even further down the ADP list. Over the last 2 weeks, his ADP is 496 on roster resource. He is not currently in his team's starting rotation, but he has said he's going to be healthy for the start of the season. It's Boston Red Sox starting pitcher Lucas Giolito.
Yeah.
Pick 496 right now, Nick. If we get word that Giolito is in fact in this rotation. You know, you and I have kind of talked about how we think that it'll be Giolito and maybe not Cutter Crawford, and Cutter Crawford, who has been a reliever in the past, will be either the sixth starter or, you know, a little bit of like a piggyback type of guy. You know, we could see a big bump for Giolito if he gets named into the starting rotation. I know it was just spring training starts, but, you know, he did look good in the Red Sox spring training last year. There was a lot of talk in the offseason that the Red Sox signed him with a clear plan led by Andrew Bailey, but plan to quote unquote fix Giolito based on some things that they had seen in his arm slot and his mechanics. And so there was a lot of optimism heading into last year. We've seen Giolito be a really strong MLB starting pitcher before. It would not surprise me if he also is healthy and another guy who's like a top 60 starting pitcher, potentially more if things actually clicked for him.
Absolutely. I'm still surprised at this thing with Giolito, that people are really still down on him. And I get it that this is NFBC stuff. This is more, this isn't your standard 12 teamers, for example. So this ADP that we're using right now should shift a lot, but it is important to note that this ADP does affect and have a weight on the first ADPs that we see. Right. And Giolito, I think, should just shoot up the boards once he's in spring training and healthy. I think the last couple of years that we've seen from Giolito are there are areas where it's clear that he could be better. And he still has a great extension. He still has a great vert. He still has a great changeup. I think the situation in Boston is fantastic for him. And yes, it could be a case where he's pitching in the spring, but they just want to be safe with him and they delay him a little bit. That's fine. It's an IL spot. Mm-hmm. And an IL spot out of spring training when it's not like a top 100 guy, that's so good. This is the kind of scenario that I go for a ton in 12 teamers, because it's not like you don't have as many IL slots usually right out of the gate, right? It's usually by May or so you're filled up with guys. But if Giolito's delayed by a couple starts or whatever it is, fine. That means I get that extra roster spot to find someone else. And that is the most valuable time for roster spots. It's the first 2 weeks of the season. So I'm so excited for this. I remember even last year we were seeing velocity increases for Giolito in the spring, and not the 91 to 93 that we saw in 2023. That was really kind of scary for us, and we're really concerned about it. Fringe starting pitcher Lucas Giolito will be starting pitcher number 3 on that team at this point. You have Garrett Crochet,
or 4, depending on your Tanner Houck feelings.
Sure. But it's a great situation, honestly, for fantasy managers right now. I think that Giolito is going to be one of the better values if this ADP in any way holds moving forward. I'm not saying that it's going to in this way, but like still underneath 200 is what I'm hoping for. And I think we'll very much get that.
Yeah. We'll stick in the AL here. Usually when teams make a concerted effort to trade for a player, we believe that they have a strong desire to have that player on their team. We could pencil that player in the starting rotation. However, a lot of people currently don't believe the Guardians plan to add Slade Ciccone to their starting rotation. His ADP over the last 2 weeks is pick 712. 712. Right now, Roster Resource has the Dodgers with Ben Lively and then Tristan McKenzie as their 5th starter. I think that we all know that Tristan McKenzie, when healthy, is in this rotation. I think there are lots of questions about the Tristan McKenzie health. Shane Bieber, after having Tommy John surgery to start the year, we know will almost certainly not be ready for the start of the season. So he is not a factor in that rotation. I'm a little surprised that Ciccone is not considered a potential starter in that rotation. And I understand that the major league numbers weren't great, but the AAA numbers were pretty good. There are some people already talking. We talked on one of the last few podcasts about Lance Brozdowski's discussion of Slade Ciccone kind of like splitting some of the breaking balls. Cleveland has a history of being a pretty solid pitching, organization in terms of developing pitchers. Ciccone's just 25 years old. had a 30% strikeout rate in AAA last year. So even if that takes a little bit of a dive at the major league level, I don't know that like the 19% that he showed last year feels really low for somebody who has missed bats or shown the ability to miss bats like that at AAA. Would be on a good team in a good park or a decent park. I don't know that he would be 12 team viable because we haven't quite seen that success at the MLB level. But I think there are weirder things, 15 team leagues for sure. And there are weirder things than Ciccone becoming like a pretty solid MLB starter to be going pick 714 right now.
Yeah. I mean, I understand that of being, he might get some runway in this rotation with the Guardians this year. I'm still highly suspect, or at least highly skeptical is the word I'm looking for, about Ciccone's ability to be worthwhile in your 12 teamers and even 15 teamers, considering that the 4-seamer is more of a horizontal sinker kind of pitch. And it's possible that he's able to nail the inside corner against righties more often than what we've seen so far with it. But we haven't really seen the slider take off and be well spotted. We haven't seen the changeup really be this big whiff pitch either, that he trusts a ton against lefties. A lot of erratic command there. I'm not really quite seeing enough from Slade for me to think that would happen. And it would be really surprising to me that he would have such a good spring that it just plays the hand for him, that the Guardians just say, fine, all right, you're in the rotation. That's it. And you're going to have this consistent every 5 days spot in the rotation. Also, with the Guardians, I have questions about their development once guys get to the majors.
Yes,
right? We've talked about this before.
I agree with, yeah.
And if he is in the minors a bit and he does get, make improvements there, that's one thing. But especially if he comes right out of camp and in the Guardians rotation or so, that actually might be worse if I'm following that logic.
Possibly.
So we'll see there. He's certainly not one that I'm going to be shooting up in my ranks unless I see something drastically different in this rank.
Yes.
And I'm not expecting that to happen. Sure. Right. Now with Tristan McKenzie, technically Fringe. You could say your boy Luis L. Ortiz could be Fringe in
How
here
dare
too.
You? He is locked in.
Look, if Tristan McKenzie is looking amazing, then all of a sudden Luis Ortiz is the number 5. And if you want to talk about Slade, then there you go.
So that's a question, isn't it? I mean, roster resource currently has Ben Lively as the number 2 starter. But if Tristan McKenzie is looking good, don't you feel like both Tristan McKenzie and Luis L. Ortiz are quote unquote ahead of Lively? Like Lively was good last year, but they didn't, there's not really a lot invested in him. Mm-hmm. He is somebody who has had failed at the MLB level, but he did have to kind of like leave. Yeah. He struggled and had to leave and go to Korea. Also, he's going to be 33 years old. Luis L. Ortiz is 26 and Tristan McKenzie is 27. We already talked about the Guardians like trading Josh Naylor and doing all these things because we understand the financial cap that they are under. Mm-hmm. Wouldn't you kind of assume that they want, if push came to shove, they would want the younger guys with more cost-controlled years like in the rotation to develop and continue to pitch? I just feel like Ben Lively would be an easier guy to push out of the rotation than Ortiz or McKenzie if everybody is healthy and pitching well.
Yeah. The argument to make is, well, Ben Lively just had a full season of this and he's more equipped to handle it again. That's, I think, the thinking here. It is interesting to see Gavin Williams as the SB3 and Lively as the 2. But
we'll just like to point out a full season of worse stats than Luis L. Ortiz.
Fair enough. Now, I mean, look, I'm in agreement with you that Lively is clearly, if he's doing terribly in the spring, then Lively is not going to stick around. And then you have Ortiz, you have McKenzie, you have maybe Ciccone, then you have, of course, Bieber in the wings waiting, and all these other options as well. Right. But Luis L. Ortiz and Tristan McKenzie should be considered also on the fringe here. And sure. I would imagine that I would be most encouraged by Tristan McKenzie if he does perform well. I think a lot of people would feel the same. His ADP is very low. at the moment.
649 over the last 2 weeks. 649 for Tristan McKenzie.
Right. So that might be something you might be able to jump on, especially if Tristan is looking much different and sitting 93, not hitting, sitting like 92, 93, comfortably getting a lot of having few walks is really the important thing for me there with that velocity. So pay attention to that one. If you guys don't know, also what I do in February and March when the games start up in spring training, I do my Plus Pitch podcast every day, where I review every pitcher and just tell you what it is. It doesn't always provide fruitful when it's, we're talking about velocities and we don't really know about much. But there are a lot of times that we can monitor these small changes and see how things are going. Seeing that Tyler Mahle is not throwing hard at all and is way behind the velocity, or we have Jared Jones doing well and Lisa Heel and so on and so forth.
Yes.
So definitely tune in for that. You'll have all the details you need for Tristan McKenzie, Lisa Ortiz, and of course, Ben Lively.
And I will also just say that when spring training starts up, I begin my series. That's going to have a new title this year because I got to make it something that, hits with SEO a little more so people actually find it when they search for it. But it's basically the idea of like pitchers it started off as pitchers with new pitches and should we care, analyzing pitchers who are bringing in new pitches to their arsenal and whether it actually will help them or not based on their pitch mix. And so once spring training starts and we start to see these new pitches in action, I will have a lot more of those articles. I'll tweet them out. I'm sure we'll discuss those pitchers on the podcast. So that's just a plug for that. I should note, just to end this, Tristan McKenzie, current ADP 649, as I mentioned. Joey Cantillo, current ADP 614.
Yeah.
Another guy on the fringes there.
Hold on a second. Right. Of course, Cantillo. He's got to be in this conversation more than
that was going to be my question to ask when we started talking about McKenzie. Is I know you weren't as bullish on the idea that Ciccone could jump. Do you think that if Cantillo gets labeled as a starter, if he makes the rotation, do you think he could have a jump?
Right. So there were moments last year that Cantillo actually looked like something of value, right? He had the 7-run game against the Yankees, and it was 4 games of 200 runs total after that. And yes, it did include the White Sox and the Rays and the Royals and the Twins, but he's a lefty who has a legit changeup with 7.5 feet of extension. So 92 miles per hour and a changeup that can be down at times. When it's down, it's really good. That is pretty interesting. I don't love his approach against lefties. I don't think the curve and slider are all that great. They can be. It was a combined 31% usage. Actually, I should say 20% swing strike around the curveball, but 31% on the slider. I believe the slider was actually the curveball was more of the 2-strike pitch. But I mean, what I see there is a great extension, great changeup as a lefty. That seems more promising and more consistent than what's like Ciccone brings to the table. So yeah, you might see that. I mean, that might be the clearer path for the Guardians. That is Tanner Bybee, Gavin Williams, Joey Cantillo, and then 2 of McKenzie, Ortiz, Lively, Ciccone. I think that's honestly the clearer play, but yeah, pay attention to all this. There's a lot of stuff going on.
Yes, so pay attention to a couple more of these guys who we'll talk about after this break. I have a fringe one for you, sticking in the AL Central. And it's because it is a starting pitcher who is currently not projected in the rotation, according to Roster Resource, and who has an ADP that I think is on the fringe of, like, if we could see it jump. So I'm curious if David Festa was listed as a starting pitcher for the Twins, because a lot of places currently have Chris Paddock still as the 5th starter for the Twins. David Festa over the last 2 weeks is the 84th starting pitcher off the board. So still a top 100 starter, going pick 335. So it's not in the range of the guys we had talked about before, but that is around guys like Eric Fetty, Matthew Boyd, Jackson Jobe, Cutter Crawford. So if Festa gets named the 5th starter, do you think there's a significant jump in his ADP from where it's currently at? And would you support that jump in ADP?
So I'm conflicted on Festa because it really comes down to how much stock I put in first year command. Kyle Bodie, I say it all the time. He's like, you got to throw those numbers away. And maybe I should. Because what Festa brings to the table is 95 with 7 feet of extension, which is great, and good vert. And a changeup that misses bats against lefties, about 19-20% swing strike rate against them. And then a loopier slider at 86. His overall command of this wasn't that great. It's a four-seamer also that has massive cut action. And that means essentially has glove side movement in there too. So seeing two plane four-seamer like that is actually kind of cool. And I just don't believe he can command it and might still have that shag rug associated with his development that is just gonna be more volatile than we normally see. But how much development should we expect? And I honestly think, hey, what do you know? A cutter should be there, because lean into that horizontal movement at 91 with that extension makes all the sense. It does also mean that he should be very good against lefties. You have that big change of going down away, and you have that natural cut action on the four-seamer, means that should eat up bats inside to them. So then it's about, well, hold on, what's this 86 mile per hour slider like? He doesn't get it down. He keeps it a little too high. At times it turns into that strike pitch instead of the, hey, watch out, my slider's coming kind of pitch. So there's a little bit extra needed in that, I think, that cutter, and also just the overall command for Festa, which would make him frustrating to have as a fantasy manager. And I really don't want to touch frustrating as much as I can. Those hipsters, headache-inducing pitchers stifling the entire roster. So he's certainly a guy, David Festa, that I'm going to be looking at in spring training. I think he should get the job, if not over Pollack, also Simeon Woods Richardson. Personally, he's just so much better and has much better stuff. And it's just, let him develop in the majors, please. I think the Chris Paddock experiment is not going to work out. Simeon Woods Richardson is very, so that's where I am on the whole twin situation. But yeah, I would certainly, in 15 teamers, I think this is a fantastic play if he's in that rotation. 12s, it's a riskier one. You have to be willing to cut bait quickly in the beginning of the year and not get too stuck thinking like, no, he's going to break out and I can't drop him right before he does.
Which we support, right? If David Festa looks good in spring and wins a starting job, totally. I don't know that he's still somebody in a 12-team league that you're going to take with like a mid-round pick. He still probably is near the end of a 12-team draft where, like, if the first two starts of the year are not good, you could say, well, the spring training didn't carry over. It is what it is, right? I'm going to go pick up Garrett Crochet, whoever has the really strong start of the year. But yeah, I mean, that I was interested in Festa based on what he did in the minor leagues, and I know it was inconsistent at the major league level. And if we, and the Twins are an organization, granted, it's not always work that's done by them, but their starting pitchers at the major league level have started to make adjustments in the offseason and improve, what they do in their arsenal and things like that, that it wouldn't surprise me if David Festa came back with a little bit more developed as a starting pitcher, with an adjustment to an arsenal or an adjustment to a pitch that makes him a little bit more consistent than we saw last year. And I would take a gamble on the end of drafts and then see.
Yeah. I see that extension and I see so much ability and everything. I'm like, that's generally very good. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, we're so close. It's like a month away.
I know, it's wild. Pitches
oh my God.
So close. We're going to move to the AL West. I got two teammates who are currently not factored into the Rangers starting rotation. But you already alluded to the fact that Tyler Mahle is no sure thing in this Rangers starting rotation. And then also there's a lot of chatter out there, and from people who I know who work in Major League Baseball organizations, there's some additional chatter that the Rangers may actually be playing around with moving John Gray to the bullpen.
Yes.
Which would open up a rotation spot for either Kumar Rocker or Jack Leiter. Kumar Rocker, currently the 78th starting pitcher off the board with an ADP of 301. And Jack Leiter, who had a much better AAA season, did not carry over to his MLB innings, but had a much better AAA year last year. the 153rd starting pitcher off the board right now. Pick go with an ADP of 669 overall. I think Kumar Rocker is more likely to be named into the starting rotation if one spot opens, but I threw both these guys in there. Do you think that either of these guys would rise significantly? I mean, Rocker's already inside the top 80. Could you see moving him up significantly if we knew he was starting the year in the rotation?
Yeah, I think this is where he goes, right? I mean, looking at this, we have Kumar Rocker at 78, but then there's Reese Olson at 73. And just to put that in perspective, Walker Buehler's at 71 right now. I don't really think that we're all going to be higher on it than we are right now for Kumar Rocker. The appeal here is pretty clear that it's a four-seamer that comes in really hard. It does not have good vert, but it's good enough extension. And then he has a slider that looks like a wipeout one that he actually has intent going back foot to lefties with too. So I love the command I saw with Kumar Rocker as well. It surprised me, honestly. Usually you have these kind of flamethrowers, these 1-2 combo guys that are more erratic, especially like Hunter Green when he first came up is a good example in my view. That hopefully is continuing on in the spring through Kumar Rocker. I would like him. I would think that there is still going to be more volatility than the small sample size than we saw. I'd like him more than David Festa, for example, as someone that, let's say they were both in that rotation. I prefer Rocker and his skill set more. But I don't really think I can put him much higher than that. I mean, it's the end of BC ADP that we're looking at, which always values volume more than you should in a 12-teamer. So you have things like Jose Barrios is at 60 right now. You have actually these aren't really necessarily okay. Ranger Suarez at 73, stuff like that.
Right.
So it is actually interesting to see Mackenzie Gore at 54. Oh, that's a conversation for another time.
I know there are some guys that you were just mentioning that I was like, Reese Olson. Obviously, we didn't mention him here because he's not on the fringe of the Tigers rotation. Yeah. His ADP could rise a lot in the next month, but it just doesn't fit the if he gets the job part of it. But yes, there are a lot of interesting guys when I was doing this where I was like, these ADPs are going to be so different soon.
Yeah, and then you have Jackson Jobe at 77 as well. Speaking of those Tigers, we don't know if he's going to make that rotation. We've been hoping he would for a bit. Mm-hmm. It might be one of those cases where they keep him in AAA right in the beginning, but it's just first opportunity. He's there. And yeah, they're back to back right around 300. Kumar Rocker, Jackson Jobe. I prefer Jackson Jobe if Jobe has a rotation spot. I just think the overall arsenal is just so much more. But Kumar Rocker should certainly be on your radar. If he does get that number 5 spot, I would be very happy having him at the back end of my 12-teamers. He's someone who can just explode on a strikeout run right at the beginning of the year. So, and Jack Leiter on the other side of it, command just isn't there. And it's so frustrating because from a stuff perspective, Jack Leiter has everything you want. He has the velocity, he has the vert, he has the extension, he has the low arm angle with his 4-seamer. It's awesome. And he just can't locate it, nor can he locate a secondary pitch to get strikes. Mm-hmm. And it's just, oh, you're so close, Jack Leiter. That slider can miss bats a ton. I know it can. And he needs more time in the minors to really figure that out. So if he does get a job out of camp, it would have to be with some offering getting strikes. That's not there right now. A cutter high. You're the cutter coming, I'm telling you. Or his 4-seamer just being so well spotted, that kind of thing. But I doubt we're going to see that.
Yeah. Yes, it is. It's what once was when these two were at Vanderbilt and what we thought they were going to become. One AOS pitcher, I do just want to another AOS pitcher. I do want to point out Greg in the comments saying I like Jose Soriano. I know that Nick and I both like Jose Soriano. He is firmly locked into the Angels rotation at this point, so doesn't constitute kind of like a fringe pitcher whose value may increase. But yeah, we are both fans of him. A pitcher who we like. It's not like I am so over the moon for this guy, but he was pretty good last year for like a long stretch, and Roster Resource doesn't have him in the A's starting rotation right now. But Osvaldo Bido was actually pretty good. And he's currently outside of the rotation and with an ADP of 617. He will probably go into spring training in a battle with Joey Estes and Mitch Spence because Severino, Springs, and JP Sears seem locked into rotation spots. I kind of feel like Joey Estes is a good bet to keep a rotation spot, but it wouldn't shock me if Beto beats out Mitch Spence as the 5th starter in Oakland, in Athletics world. They don't even want to use
the Athletics world. It's
but I guess it's probably not a 12-team guy, but currently going of the 134th starting pitcher overall.
right.
Like Beto would have a pretty significant jump if he gets named into this rotation.
What's so interesting about Beto is I think his value last year rooted in his four-seamer command and locations, and he was really good at staying away from both lefties and righties with a four-seamer, but dotting the edge, shockingly so. The fact that he had a 33% ICR against lefties with this four-seamer and then a 24% against righties is just what? Now, he did have a cutter to match with this four-seamer, but it was a low 54% strike rate. It wasn't one of those, oh, cool, this is just filling up the zone and you don't really know which one it's going to be. What's also interesting against righties, it was just a 57% strike rate too. So it's a lot of getting away with it from last year with Beto.
Right.
And I understand 24% K rate, 3.41 ERA, 109 whip. It's hard to just have that, but a 28% overall ICR is wild, like absolutely wild to me. And I cannot pinpoint exactly how he did it. I guess I'll put it this way. It's guys just gave him what he wanted a lot. Like he would get behind in at bats and then he'd keep throwing out of the zone and guys would get impatient. The main pitches for Beto was this changeup to lefties. They threw 30% of the time. It had a 55% strike rate, but only 16% ICR. So low hits, few hits, right? If you want to talk about the four-seamer, well, yeah, as I mentioned, that was 57% strike rate, but that 23% ICR. The cutter made up for another 20%. That's 55% pitches that had a 55% strike rate. It was so weird, and I would not buy back into this. I don't really think he has that great of a slider. I mean, yes, 75% strikes, 17% swing strike rate. That saved him a lot in this, as he would go out of the zone a bit with all the other stuff, and then he would throw the slider and then whatever against right-handers. And against lefties, he didn't really have that kind of pitch. I don't know. I see smoke and mirrors all throughout it. I'm not that interested in Beto. If he gets that job as SP5 for the Athletics, I'm not taking the chance, really. I think it's just one of those weird seasons.
I agree with you. I'm not a huge fan. But I could see in a deeper format saying, hey, this guy could be in the rotation. There's not a lot behind him, so like maybe it is just him or Mitch Spence. But yes,
well, that's the thing. I prefer Mitch Spence.
Okay. I do like that you like that nothing he throws goes straight.
Oh, I feel like one of the things that we find it hard to do is figure out who is going to be different the next year, right?
Right.
And who's going to be throwing harder. Who's going to, have a brand new pitch or something. But when you have a cutter and a slider as your first two pitches that are both super high PLVs, actually Mitch Spence has a 90th percentile PLV slider. I kind of like that, and he doesn't have that. He doesn't give in with that sinker, right? When he throws it, it's dramatically off the plate to right-handers. And he's just hoping to get a quick out with that. And otherwise, then fine, I'll just go with the cutter away or the slider away, and that's it, done. Like that to me is more sustainable year to year, I think, than what Beto does.
I get that. I get that for sure. I should say before we fully move to the NL, I just noticed on the ADP a guy who I think you and I both feel like is in the rotation right now, but maybe he constitutes fringe because he hasn't actually been a starting pitcher for the last couple of years. But the Houston Astros traded for Hayden Wesneski The thought is that Hayden Wesneski will likely get a shot to be in the rotation. He's currently the 114th starting pitcher off the board, going with an ADP of 550. Obviously, it would be more than just, hey, Hayden Wesneski is a starter, right? We'd probably want to see something in the spring because he hasn't been an effective starter before. But if the Astros say he's in our starting rotation, it is the Astros. There's likely to be a bump. We get 1 or 2 good spring training starts in there as well. I feel like this is a guy you could see soar up some boards from currently going starting pitcher 114.
You know what's so funny? I was at the winter meetings. I got to meet Tyler Zombro in person. I'd been talking to him before. And if you guys don't know, he's now with the Cubs and working with their starting pitchers, right? And the winter meetings were right before the Kyle Tucker, Hayden Wesneski deal on that Friday. And he was saying, oh man, I just can't wait to work with Hayden Wesneski. I have all these plans for him. I can't wait to do it. And then a couple days later. So with Hayden Wesneski, he is an extension guy with a really good breaking ball. That sweeper is really his bread and butter. It's been the thing that has wowed us over a couple seasons now, especially when he first came up in 2022. We were just really stoked about it. Never really got got comfortable in a starting spot or really had the free reign that we wanted him to have. It does look like with JP France, Luis Garcia, Christian Javier, and Lance McCullers all just like, not going to happen at the beginning of the year. They don't have many other options to go to. Maybe Forrest Whitley finally becomes that guy. No, it's not going to happen.
Not going to happen. No.
So, yeah, it looks like Wesneski has that opportunity unless they sign somebody else. Maybe Flaherty goes to the Astros. That actually seems like a decent fit for this situation. But let's just say, Hayden Wesneski, you get the number 5 spot. Should we care? I don't know. I'm not in love with his heater. It is really more of a sinker. It has 13th percentile vertical movement. That is 11 inches, right? Not the 17 that we want to see. Not like the 13 or 14 that's below average. That is bad. This is 11. This is drop really to it. But he does get 7 feet of extension. So it makes me wonder if this is something that he can lean into and stay down. But all you've really seen from Wesneski is that it's a big breaking ball and then these other pitches that hopefully get outs. I don't know what we're going to see. I'm really curious about it. I would love to see something else in the secondary department that makes me feel as if he has another option outside of these fastballs, the 4-seamer and sinker, to complement the sweeper. Because we saw 9% cutters last year, 3% changeups. Maybe the cutter is that reliable one. We saw that way back when. Yeah,
he could make meaningful changes. I think we just saw that small stretch in 2022, and it was like, oh, maybe, and this sweeper is really good. And then it just looked like somebody who's just better out of the bullpen. And I think that that's kind of just better in multi-innings out of the bullpen. And I think he could be useful for the Astros without being like a locked-in starter. I just don't see them fixing him into being like a 27 start a year guy who's like, legitimately a viable fantasy option. Right. And maybe it's just me not opening myself up to growth enough, Nick, but,
I mean, I think this is the fun part for us, is trying to see, okay, what are you doing? What is it that the Astros are going to try and turn Wesneski into? The sinker command, very good against righties last year. This is actually pretty cool. He had a 4% outside location rate on that sinker, which is amazing. 4%. Second percentile, right? Yeah. Why is that amazing? Because a lot of times when guys throw sinkers, the timing, because you sometimes have to get them more on the side of the ball, means that you're generally going to mess up at least 10% of the time and tug the ball with you outside, if not 15, 20% of the time. And you do it 4%. That's 4 times out of 100 sinkers thrown, is pretty dang cool. So that does speak to having good command of his sinker.
Right.
And maybe this is something they can play with. They can adjust it. They can keep that sinker down and into right-handers, sinker, sweeper away, and then the cutter in between. I don't know. I'm curious to see what we get.
Maybe we'll be wrong about Hayden Wesneski. Who knows? We're going to do a few more guys, but this time from the NL. But we're going to do that after this break. All right, I'm going to combine two guys for you right now because they're both in the NL East, and they are going back to back right now in ADP, with neither one of them currently being locked into a rotation spot. I think I know the answer to this because we've talked about one of these guys enough, and I know you're not a fan. But if either of these two pitchers gets announced as being in their starting rotation, who do you think will see the biggest ADP jump, and who should see the biggest ADP jump between the 90th starting pitcher off the board, going pick 394, DJ Hers from the Nationals, and the 91st starting pitcher off the board, going pick 400, Grant Holmes of the Atlanta Braves?
So, okay, I don't really consider, I think we'd all agree that Hurst shouldn't be on the fringe. I know that roster resource says, cool, it's Mackenzie Gore, Jake Irvin, Mitchell Parker, Trevor Williams. Fine. DJ Hurst should be 5. Michael Soroka is there. What's up? That feels like a depth piece. He has an opportunity. We'll see how this goes. Maybe Trevor Williams doesn't have the command he used to have. That kind of thing. But
that's where it's like he has to be named official, because they did acquire Soroka and then say they acquired him to start, even though Soroka was actually decent for the White Sox as a reliever and probably should just be moved into the bullpen. And that might be what happens.
No, don't you dare do that to Soroka. Don't you dare. Okay. I mean, we saw Michael Soroka in 2019. All right. I believe it was 2019, but it was 2019.
What even happened? What even happened back then? I don't even know.
I don't know the before times. And Soroka showcased the ability of a veteran starter at age 20. All right. The ability to manipulate his fastballs beautifully, set up batters, utilize his pitches correctly. And the idea of turning him into a reliever is just the thing that I went through when I went to college, and it drove me insane. Even though it worked, it was fine, and it's good for Soroka too. Just don't. I'm not going to wish that on him. Okay. He's going to be the backup long reliever for when there is an opportunity. And I know that the Nationals also got Ogasawara. Nope. I'm going to get this at one point, and I'm so sorry. Ogasawara. I'm going to go with that. He's not really going to be a strikeout guy. Did not have a lot of strikeouts on MPB at all. This is not that guy that you really want to chase. He could be a Toby at some point, but it's more of a 15-team scenario, waiver wire ad later on. But DJ Hers, to me, is really interesting because I see a lot of people mentioning, oh, DJ Hers is my guy. He's the one I'm targeting in leagues. There are a lot of things going against him. One, I'm just going to put it out there, the thing that I don't even talk about a lot, but be aware, DJ Hers is not going to get a ton of wins. The Nationals are not going to get a ton of wins. That is not a wonderful offense. I could be wrong. Maybe Dylan Cruz and Jason Wood are going to improve it.
A lot of people think the Nationals are a feisty pick to make the playoffs. I don't think so. And I think it's because I don't think this rotation is good enough. Like, I think the Nationals have some interesting young bats. I don't think this rotation is good enough to pitch them into the playoffs. But I just wanted to point out that there are a lot of people out there that Paul Sporer who believe that the Nationals are a frisky playoff team.
Okay. I mean, I need to assess the offense better than, but I get the sense that they're not going to be this. I would say that they're going to be a more average, if not below average, win potential situation for DJ Hers. Could be very wrong there. What really does concern me, though, is that his four-seamer performed with a 15% swing strike rate last year. And I don't know why. Sometimes we see this. Sometimes we see guys that just are able to execute in the right moments with it. Maybe the changeup nullifies a lot of it, especially against right-handers and when the thing is working. But watching him start to start last year, it was really frustrating because DJ Hers some days was able to command his four-seamer and his changeup well, and things could go according to plan. And other days, the changeup just wouldn't be there, and he had nothing against right-handers. I just don't see the makeup of a guy that is going to maintain this 28% K rate that we saw this past year. I see something that is more smoke and mirrors with 25% plus put away rates against right-handers, and then also massive struggles against lefties. His four-seamer and slider were the two pitches. Both of them had a 40% ICR, which is a little strange to see, but I think goes to show how ineffective that slider is against lefties. He doesn't command it well. It's not really this massive pitch that you want it to be. I just think that hers is going to be one of those hipster types that are going to have these wonderful, nice little stretches, a couple games here and there that are going to pull you in. But overall, I mean, I want to remind everyone he had a 9% to 10% walk rate last year. And I don't think that's going to go away.
And I know from talking to you last year, you are actually a believer in Grant Holmes. Now, Grant Holmes by Grant Holmes by roster resource is in the rotation, but I don't think he's being drafted as if he's in the rotation. I mean, a 400 ADP suggests that people don't believe Grant Holmes is a starter for the Braves. Now, part of that could be Spencer Strider's coming back. Mm-hmm. However, we feel pretty confident that Strider's going to miss at least the first month of the season. Maybe they think Ian Anderson will hold off Grant Holmes. Right now, Holmes and Anderson are slated to be in the rotation. Maybe they think that AJ Smith-Shawver or Hurston Waldrop will push Grant Holmes out of the rotation. Who knows? But Grant Holmes was pretty good as a starter for the Braves last year. He's only 28, so it's not like he's, some like 35-year-old journeyman who they can't leave in the rotation for these young guys. But I feel like Grant Holmes as a starting pitcher should probably be going a little higher than this. And I'm curious if you think we'll see a big jump if he gets put in the rotation or officially put in the rotation.
Grant Holmes is your prototypical Cleveland Guardians pitcher. His four-seamer relies on command, of which he actually had really good command of. Last year, throwing away four-seamers and upstairs against right-handers, and then 2 breaking balls, a slider and a curveball, that both are 20% swing strike rate against lefties and righties. It wasn't just completely split one way or the other. I mean, normally we just see it against righties. Slider and curveball each had a 20% plus swing strike rate against lefties last year. And what's really also hilarious is that he never learned a slider until he got to Atlanta, which is just insane to me. That's like the first thing you teach a right-hander is you have to have a slider. Here you go. No one taught it to him until Atlanta, which is wild. And it's a phenomenal pitch. Now, he doesn't have extension. It's not a good four-seamer. It's 94, and the best thing is that it's 94. But he does locate it well. And I think that Atlanta, who had him going 90 pitches in the middle of the year and then slowed it down by the end, are going to rely on Grant Holmes. I don't really see other options that would push him away. Ian Anderson shouldn't do it. And even that is the number 5. Dylan Dodd, yay. Then you also have AJ Smith-Shawver, Hurston Waldrop, as you mentioned, Bryce Elder, and Davis Daniel. Smith-Shawver, I think they're going to be a little slower with. They obviously brought him up for a moment last year. But I think it's a case where, look, you have this lovely thing. It's Grant Holmes. It works. He's the real estate broker. You have free money here. There's no reason to rush this. If anything, Smith-Shawver takes over for Ian Anderson, who I would have far less confidence in. Hurston Waldrop should be a reliever, if you ask me. Bryce Elder is your backup depth. If you need something, I guess he's there. And same with Davis Daniel. But Holmes has proven himself as very much capable. And I'm all for this. I also think that Atlanta is going to win a ton of games. And you're going to see Grant Holmes go further than 5 innings. Why? Because he has such a low walk rate, 5% walk rate. He throws strikes. Those sliders and curves, I'm talking about getting those swing strikes. It is so rare. I don't think I've actually seen this, to see 2 pitches have a 68 and a 71% strike rate, 50% of your breaking balls. Both of them be that high of strike rates. It's incredible. He commands them really well down. This is repeatable. So I'm very much in on Grant Holmes for next year. And sure, he'll have those moments when the fastball gets beat up, and that's going to be that. But there will be more helpful starts than harmful. And this ADP, it's pretty fantastic to go and get him.
Got to do it. I agree with you on this. And I think you will see that value rise in the weeks ahead. So Holmes is one guy that I'm pretty bullish on from where they're going right now. There's another Holmes I wanted to talk to you about, who I'm not necessarily as bullish on, but Clay Holmes.
Yes, the Adobe.
Going pick 328, 328, the 83rd starting pitcher off the board. it doesn't actually feel like I can't decide if he's going to jump. If it's not a Fringe thing, right? Because everybody knows the Mets are going to give him a shot.
Well, I don't know if they know that. There's like this,
well,
they hear that a lot, right?
They know he's going to be given a shot because of the amount of money he was signed for, and the fact that the Mets said they're going to give him a shot. I guess my question to you though is, how much movement could there be? Like, if we see 1 or 2 good starts in the spring, do you think people are going to go Michael King and move him into the top 50 starters, or is everybody just going to go maybe and like bump him up 10 spots?
Yeah, I think that honestly there is some trepidation right now because they don't quite believe it, and they think, okay, they're going to try this and it's not going to work with Clay Holmes as a starter because, oh my gosh, he was such an inconsistent reliever. How could you possibly think that this is going to be a good starter? Because honestly, guys, Clay Holmes, the Adobe, has the arsenal that speaks more to a starter. If you are sinker focused and have breaking balls that work, you have those innings as a reliever that don't go your way, especially if you're a sinker baller. But what happens is if you have an arsenal that's efficient, then that speaks to getting 5 or 6 innings where you have one of those spikes, but then the whole thing is good, right? And I think that Clay Holmes' sinker is still great. It is a very, very lively sinker, a phenomenal drop. We talk about 4-seamers. Oh, hey, it's cool. We have like 15, 16, 17 inches of 3 inches of vertical movement. That is so much drop. It's remarkable. And you pair that with a slider and a sweeper. Both of these pitches are whiff pitches, 18% swing strike rates, with strike rates around 65% as well. It is just fantastic. So he destroys right-handers in this way. And really the big question with Grant Holmes is, okay, are you going to be effective enough to get the opposite-handed batter out that is the lefty? And I think when you see Clay Holmes as a starter, you're going to see something more with a cutter possibly, or a changeup or something else, not just that sinker, because you got to find something else. And that's really the thing I'm going to be looking for the most this spring. Because, yeah, that sinker, it did have a 38% ICR, cool, but lower strike rate, 64%, much lower swing strike rate. And the sweeper obviously isn't as effective. You never see sweepers more effective against opposite-handed batters. It's because going into them. And it's slow enough that it's not going to jam them. It's just going to be pulled down the line effectively. So that's the thing I'm going to be looking for the most, but I'm ready for it. I don't think they would be signing him as a starter if Clay Holmes didn't have that other weapon against left-handers kind of in the tank that they've seen and known about and looked up. So I'm excited for it. I think there is potential here. That said, Clay Holmes is not going to be a low whip pitcher. Being a sinker baller like this means that you are going to have an elevated hit per 9. And he had an 8.6 last year, just in relief, 7.3 the previous year. But generally, it means that you're going to have a slightly uptick of walks, 8% we've seen. And you're going to not have that suppressed like 6 hit per 9 potential. Really, it's going to be more like 7 to 8, all that kind of stuff. But there's excitement here. And I think he can slip through the cracks if everyone's just like, nah, this isn't really going to work. I'm curious to see if he adds anything in the spring. Clay Holmes, the Adobe. He's interesting.
Why the Adobe?
Clay Holmes.
Oh, I get it. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. That's pretty
great.
Nose.
Thank you so much.
Pretty on the nose. You're good. You're good. Good for you. Last one in the NL East, and then I kind of wrap us up with kind of some trendy younger guys. This guy, despite being in the rotation currently on roster resource, ended last year hurt. So I think people maybe are unsure if he's actually going to be in the rotation, if he'll be healthy, if whatever. Actually, he didn't end last season hurt. He pitched a couple games in September. But I'm surprised that Ryan Weathers is going outside of the top 100 starting pitchers with an ADP of 486 right now. Going around Andrew Painter, Kyle Harrison, Jordan Montgomery, Reed Detmers. I'm curious if we get confirmation that Ryan Weathers is in the rotation, healthy to start the year, all things we think we're going to get. Do you see a boost for Ryan Weathers, who actually looked like he had made some real improvements last year before getting
I love the fact that his His sinker does well against lefties. You have four seamers that perform well on opposite sides of the plate. Changeup that does well against the right-handers, 20% swing strike rate. Okay, that's a lot of promise. That's cool. But the breaking ball is really everything. 52% strike rate to both lefties and righties. And that's the thing, though. If he's able to get that going, then he has a better tool against left-handers. If he keeps that 20% swing strike rate against right-handers and really locates that four-seamer effectively, maybe the velocity comes back to 96 that we saw in September, not the 94, 95.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a path to success. Like the sinker inside of lefties really has to be emphasized. And then you have that slider as well because against lefties, because really against right-handers, that changeup should do a ton of work. I'm into this. And also the fact that, yes, I know this sounds wild, but he lost 20 pounds. And he really had this whole thing about his mental headspace and everything like that, and just being more focused and just better for himself. And I know best shape of your life, but like I think it's actually going to affect Ryan Weathers in a good way. Wins might be a problem. And that might be why we see that depressed ADP. I don't know if he's going to be a 12-team target for me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be monitoring him. I think he's a sneaky 15-team ad.
Yeah, I like Ryan Weathers. I did blurb his weight loss for NBC Sports, so I know that like he talked in that the article that was about obviously it was about maintaining his cardio and strength throughout the season, but it was maybe just about like he felt that he was putting on the weight during the year, and it had to do with kind of like regulating his energy and stuff like as the season went on between starts. So that idea isn't just like, oh, he lost weight, like he'll pitch, deeper into games. It was more just like his energy levels were spiking and decreasing, and he were inconsistent start to start, which obviously will impact your performance start to start as well. I'm into Ryan Weathers. We talked about the wins on the Marlins, but I like Ryan Weathers as well. Again, the team context makes me feel like there's not a huge jump here. Just a quick couple quick NL Central things. A couple guys, including Greg, did mention DL Hall. We know how much I love DL Hall. DL Hall right now for me isn't even on the fringe of the Brewers rotation. I mean, with Nestor Cortez now in Milwaukee and with Brandon Woodruff back and presumably healthy to start the year, DL Hall is not going to be in that rotation unless there are injuries. So for me, he's not on the fringe. Correct me if I'm wrong here about another NL Central team, but somebody in the chat also asked about Rhett Lauder. I don't think Rhett Lauder is on the fringe of this Reds rotation. I don't think he's in the rotation right now. The Reds added Brady Singer. They're going to get Nick Lodolo back from injury, at least at the start of the season. They picked up the option on Nick Martinez. Nick Martinez is making way too much money to not be a starting pitcher. He's making
that's what we keep saying, but then again, is whatever. I
sure.
Hope
so maybe that can be your pushback. I mean, do you think that Rhett Lauder could be in the rotation over Nick Martinez, or do you think this rotation is pretty set at Hunter Green, Nick Lodolo, Brady Singer, Andrew Abbott, Nick Martinez?
Well, we have also seen a 6-man from the Reds, and I know in the chat they're talking about 6-man right now in rotations. And what I always say is it's like the Fellowship of the Ring. Starts off with a lot of people and with grand ambitions, and it ends up with 2 guys barely surviving. And you have Carson Spires as well, who's had some starts in the past. You have Graham Ashcraft finally moved to the pen. Brent Suter's there, by the way. Hey, what's up? But yeah, I mean, I think Martinez should be in the rotation. We've also seen him messed around and put here and put there over time. So I hope he's there. I don't know. I would say it's interesting, and we should monitor Rhett Lauder. I was not impressed with Rhett Lauder when he came up. It felt again like smoke and mirrors. The command was what got him through games, and of course some luck involved there too. But when from a stuff perspective and just an overall believability, it just didn't seem right. And the fact that his 4-seamer is his number 1 thrown pitch had a 53% strike rate with a 4.38 PLV, I think says a lot about the guy. It is a 73% strike rate with only a 27% ICR on the sinker. which maybe is repeatable. I don't know quite yet. I don't think it is. But yeah, it's just not that great. Like the slider is a heavy strike pitch and doesn't really miss a ton of bats, like 15%. It's not the, oh man, this is the savior of the arsenal. Just the whole thing is just kind of weird with Rhett Lauder. And I don't think in that situation in Cincy, I would be running after this one if he does get that spot.
I agree with you on that. Last NL Central team, it's just a bunch of guys, but I don't really know a better way to say like who is on the fringe, because I think they're all on the fringe in Chicago. Because right now, I think Shota Imanaga, Justin Steele, Jameson Taillon, Matthew Boyd feel locked into 4 spots in the Cubs rotation.
Absolutely.
The fifth and sixth spot, depending on what the Cubs want to do, you've got Javier Assad, you've got Colin Ray, who they just signed. You've got Caleb Killian, who you and I have talked about in the past and enjoyed. You've got Jordan Wicks. You've got Ben Brown, who's healthy again. You've got Cody Poteet, who they just traded for from the Yankees. I don't really think that like he kind of is in the mix there, but again, he's basically the only return you got from Cody Bellinger, so maybe they like him in some respect. All of those guys that I listed are going like anywhere from pick 350 to like not even being drafted.
Right, yeah.
And I'm curious if anybody has a good spring and wins a rotation spot from those names. Is there somebody who you are just like, if this guy is in the rotation, I'm actually really interested in what they can do?
So I would say the ones really to watch are not Assad. It's not Ray. I mean, Nate Pearson, maybe that will happen. They actually even said he's going to be stretched out, but not to his starter's length, which is the funniest thing. It makes no sense to me. You also have Cade Horton, who is recovering still from his shoulder injury. So I don't know if he'll even be ready for the spring. Cody Poteet, when he does get random starts this year, is an interesting Toby type. He's good at moving around the plate. It's kind of like that traditional sinker sweeper kind of feel that the Yankees would breed, but nothing to note for the most part. So that comes down to Ben Brown, Jordan Wicks, Caleb Killian, and Javier Assad. And Javier Assad, I just do not want. He's really good at doing front hip sinkers to lefties. That's his best skill set in my view. And that's it. I do not want to touch it. Caleb Killian can throw really hard and has good extension. And then all of a sudden the next pitch, it's like 92 instead of 96 or 97. And I thought at first it was like sinker differentiation or something. Apparently it's not. It's just strange. It's not really intentional or whatever. I don't know. I'm curious if we get consistent 96 in the spring from Killian and then those sharp cutters and sliders. I think there's a lot of potential there. I would be surprised if he came into the rotation out of the gate, though, because, I mean, there's Jordan Wicks, who has shown some promise with a really good changeup when that's commanded well from the left side, with some good vert on the four-seamer. But really, there needs to be more from the slider. There needs to be more command of that four-seamer and changeup as well. I think he's still something that, someone who needs to work on a little bit more before they get that lock spot. And then everyone's favorite name is Ben Brown. And what's so interesting about Ben Brown is when you think of him, like everyone's like, oh, he throws really hard and has this amazing breaking ball. And like, that's incredible. He's just like, those other guys like Spencer Strider, Jared Jones. No, he's not. His four-seamer does not have a 10% swing strike rate against lefties or righties. It is not a whiffable pitch. It's just at 95, 96. Everything else is pretty mediocre about it. However, it is a really, really, really good curveball. It is at 86. It is a knuckle curve. And I thought to myself, that must be a slider. No, it has a lot more drop than a traditional slider. It is in that beautiful area of being a really hard curve. And hard curves are stupid good because they always fool batters just underneath them because they just can't fathom that it's going to go that far down. It's an absolute hammer. So what he needs, Ben Brown, guess what I'm going to say, Eric? What is the thing I'm going to say?
What, the pitch that he needs?
Yes.
It's probably a cutter.
He needs a cutter. Oh my gosh. Because he throws 96 and 86 and just give me another strike pitch that's not the four-seamer. And if you do that, the four-seamer then gets better because now they can't just sit on this pitch and he can get more comfortable strikes and he can save it differently. It's the most obvious, hey, learn a cutter and you can be pretty good scenario. So I'm actually so intrigued by Ben Brown for spring training. And I think if Ben Brown has a cutter and is probably stretched out with this, there's no way they're denying him over Colin Ray or Javier Assad. You just can't, because it's good. It would be that good. However, if he's not, I don't care. Right. Even Caleb Killian, I think that's still going to be I'm intrigued and I'm curious, but there's still going to be a lot of volatility. I don't know if I really want to take that risk in a 12-teamer. But my own pitching love is like, ooh, this is fun. But that's where it is with the Cubs right now. Just pay attention to Ben Brown, and hopefully he gets a cutter.
Yes. We'll end with a fun one. Two guys who have not yet, actually one guy did debut, but two stud young prospects who I think there's an argument that they could both potentially earn spots in the starting rotation for their teams, but they're not yet confirmed to be in there. If either Jackson Jobe or Bubba Chandler win spots out of spring training, who do you see being more likely? Let's say they both do. I'm just curious who you see being more likely to jump up in ADP. Right now, Jackson Jobe is the 77th starter off the board, pick 296. Bubba Chandler is the 86th starting pitcher off the board, pick 360. It should be noted, Bubba Chandler is not on the 40-man roster. The Pirates would need to add him to the 40-man roster in order to put him in the starting rotation. But he has already pitched at AAA. If he has a good spring training, we've seen them be aggressive, much like they were with Jared Jones last year. They have, Braxton Ashcraft, who is also a top 5 prospect for them, who's on the 40-man, who could get a shot over Bubba Chandler, but Bubba Chandler is the superior prospect, obviously. Jackson Jobe is on the 40-man. He's been in the big leagues. He was pitching out of the bullpen. There's a good chance that he could start the year in the rotation unless the Tigers want to kind of manage his innings a little bit. But let's say both of these guys are in the rotation. Who are you jumping the most from their current ADP?
Well, I think it's from the current ADP.
Well, I mean, but their ADPs are very similar. Jobe is the 77th starter and Bubba Chandler is the 86th starter.
I want them both.
They're both around pick 300 or later.
Right. So right now they're not drafted in 12-teamers, guys. And both of them absolutely would be in my top 60, I believe, if not 65. Essentially, once you get past the point of Holly of, hey, I'm drafting a guy that I have the utmost confidence that ability-wise they will help my teams this year. Then you get into the fun, like, all right, now we're going to start taking chances and expecting to drop some guys. And that's when I would say, well, okay, Bubba Chandler and Jackson Jobe, when they arrive here, I have a ton of confidence that they could be top 30, top 40 potential output, right? So between the two of them, Jackson Jobe is the one that I'm going to favor as of now. Just from the start of like, hey, cool, it's the Tigers and not the Pirates. Is pretty cool. Yes, PNC Park is a better situation, but I don't know. I'd rather be on the Tigers right now. Mm-hmm. And I think also the breadth of arsenal with Jackson Jobe is better. We didn't really see that in relief last year, but what we saw at the beginning of the year was more of a 4-pitch mix. You have the 4-seamer, the slider, the cutter, and the curve. With Bubba Chandler, it's a 4-seamer that is good. Like it's 504 PLV is what we had based on the 7 AAA games we saw last year. 96-97 is great. 6.7 extension. 16 inches of vert, 1.2 high adjusted VAA. Very good command though. And that's an interesting part is that he doesn't go low with it. He actually sits up with it and then pairs it with a slider down and away from right-handers with a changeup to lefties that it's a little too much gets too much on the side of it a bit. But I like what he does and it feels like he's executing and doing what he wants to do. The one worry I do have about Jackson Jobe is the fact that it is a lower extension than what we normally see, only at 6 feet. I mean, he's also at 96, 97. He has more vert on that fastball. But the breadth of what he does, that cutter, I like more than Bubba Chandler's slider when it works. It's close. There is something to be said about Chandler being a more overall command pitcher and feeling like it's a little bit more polished in this way. Mm-hmm. I'm excited to watch both of them, and hopefully we get data for both of them too. Regardless of the one that we are going to go for, and honestly, I won't be able to really know until about March 15th, March 20th, or so. Maybe even like last week, like it was with Jared Jones, like right under the gun. We finally found out about Jared Jones.
Yes.
I would, whatever the data of the spring honestly tells us between the two of them. I think they're really the main two. Noah Schultz should not get the call out of the gate. And as of right now, I'm not hyper aware of another ultra prospect. You could say maybe some stuff about Kumar Rocker or David Festa, but those surprising guys that haven't pitched yet in the majors and would get the call out of camp. I'm still going through all my teams, so there could be someone that I'm missing completely here. But as of right now, it's Job and Chandler are right there.
Yeah. Also, I would just say Job and Chandler, not a hyper prospect, but keep an eye on Braxton Ashcraft for the Pirates. I think that Braxton Ashcraft is as good, if not better, than Thomas Harrington. And I know Uncle Ted will get so mad about it because he talks about Thomas Harrington in the chat all the time. But Ashcraft is a really good prospect. He's rated higher by MLB Pipeline. He's rated higher in the Pirate system. He had a really good year last year. He sits in the mid 90s with a plus slider. His slider is like a legit weapon. The fastball has a history of getting hit. The fastball has a history of getting hit a little bit hard. That's an issue. It's not like he's Jared Jones with a plus slider and an elite fastball, but he does have a pretty good curveball. So he has, 3 good pitches. I just think Braxton Ashcraft is a pretty solid pitcher who's already on the 40-man roster. And I think if he looks good in the spring, it wouldn't surprise me if the Pirates gave him a shot. And I don't think he's Skeens Chandler Jones. I don't think he's one of those guys who blows up, but it wouldn't surprise me if he was somebody who was a useful fantasy pitcher in 2025 if he earns a starting spot.
Yeah. So that slider had like a 5.3 PLV, which honestly, when seeing that from a minor league pitcher is really, really good. But the 4-seamer does not, it looks pretty bad. Yes. I know you mentioned that it looked hittable, but yeah, it looks pretty bad. And the sample that we saw, at least in AAA, the curveball wasn't that consistent and that much of a catalyst for him. The slider is just insanely good. And generally when I see a guy with one slider, one good pitch and it's a slider, I don't go for it, especially for minor leaguers. That's the, of course, the Huascar Ynoa rule. And especially for prospects, it's not my cup of tea. Like, I believe in Bubba Chandler's more. I believe in Jackson Job's more.
100%.
So that's how I am. But maybe that changes, and to see the reports, them.
Well, but that's why
like that. Maybe the command and everything it takes it over.
It's plus command. I mean, that's why Braxton Ashcraft is like the 80th prospect overall, and Bubba Chandler is much higher, and Jackson Job is much higher. I mean, what was it? A 4% walk rate last year in the minors for Braxton Ashcraft, somebody who tops out at 97, 98. Like, there's improvements to be made. And that's why I said you'd have to see something in the spring. You'd have to see something that pairs with the slider. But Absolutely. The Pirates have shown that with their young pitchers, if they show something in spring that they're capable of, and the Pirates have already said they're going to give Ashcraft a chance to win a rotation spot. Like, he's on the 40-man. He's coming to spring training. They're going to give him a shot. He just has to beat out one of Bailey Falter and Johan Oviedo. It's not the biggest obstacle to clear. He needs to show improvement and growth, but it's just a name to throw out there. We're like, he's not vaulting up rankings in a Bubba Chandler way, but he's going to vault from nobody's drafting this guy to like, hey, this guy could be decent.
Oh my gosh. I haven't heard that name for so long.
Johan Oviedo.
Oviedo.
Yeah.
Oh man, Oviedo was so close. He had this game. Here it is. It was 10 strikeouts against the Giants. It was throwing 96, and it had a beautiful slider. And then it just kind of went away.
Maybe that's your fringe guy.
7 feet of extension at 95, 96. Just pure drop. And like, his 4-seamer is really just a sinker. I mean, we're talking like first percentile vertical break for Oviedo. I haven't done the Pirates yet. Okay.
There's a lot to talk about.
Oh my gosh. The slider had a 20% swing strike rate against righties. Really, the question then is it with lefties? And it's still a very effective slider. And
Oviedo had an
extension. It's like
he had a 372. He had a 372 ERA in 77 innings in the second half last year. Like, it's
in 2023. because you
Okay,
had Tommy John and he
yes.
hasn't been back.
True.
Oh
Yes.
man. That's interesting. And of course, Billy Falter would just get traded to the Rays, so don't worry about that. I just did a very quick look up, and by the way, if you don't know this, if you have PL Pro, we have these amazing apps, and one of them is player cards for minor leaguers last year, AAA. That gives us all the things that I talk about all the time: four-seamer movement and extension and vert. Same with breaking stuff, and also our pitch model, a PLV, which isn't just stuff; it's also location based and is relative to major league talent. And so I can quickly look up all these guys that were in AAA last year as we're doing this podcast, which is amazing. And so I have Thomas Harrington. Here we go. Uncle Ted, how do I feel about this guy? He fills the zone with four seamers. He was Uncle Ted was calling him George Kirby 2.0. I don't agree with that because he's just throwing strikes from a lower arm slot. So he gets a lot of arm side break. And it's at 92, 93, not elite extension. It's average. I don't really love that. He has a big sweeper that stays away, which is good. That's what it's supposed to do. We love it. We think it's a very good offering. In between that, there is a cutter that also PLV loves. He gets in the zone a ton. But that's it, kind of. I mean, maybe the changeup is something that will be good against lefties, especially with that lower arm slot. You do get the ability to get more aggressive movement for it. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, like changeup sweeper. Think of it like that with his cutter in between. PLV doesn't really love the changeup that much. He tugs it a little too much. And as far as I mentioned with Braxton and stuff, like that's where I pulled that from. So to me, Bubba Chandler is like clearly ahead of these guys as far as talent goes and what matters for your 12-teamer. I'm very curious to see how they've changed. Obviously, when it comes to development, like we see massive jumps year to year in prospect land, and it could also be negatively too. So it's always an exciting time in the spring. We can't wait to follow all of it. And yeah, Johan Oviedo, maybe he's just feeling great.
Maybe he's the guy. You never know. We'll have to check it out, and you'll learn or you'll hear about that as we continue to go through all these starting pitchers. Talk about it continuously. We are 2 episodes away, if I'm doing my math, from your from unveiling your rankings, which might mean I have to do my rankings next week, but we are getting into rankings season. We're going to go over my rankings first, and then we're going to go over Nick's rankings so that mine are not impacted by Nick's. And then we're going to be in spring training. Pitchers and catchers are going to have reported. We're going to be going over some news. We're going to be going over, things that are impacting the rankings, all of that. We are close, ladies and gentlemen. We are close.
Can't wait.
I'm excited. I'm ready. Also, especially after that horrible Buffalo Bills loss last night. That is crushed.
Oh my gosh! Don't do this. Don't bring football into this. Okay?
I'm ready to fully move on to baseball.
Take us away, Eric.
The Super Bowl doesn't exist. I am Eric Samulski, the Pelican.
I'm Nick Pollack, the Lion.
And I'm about to go watch some Johan Oviedo footage.